Morning, everyone. Okay, so it is Sunday morning and 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Um, and good morning. Good morning, Liberat. Good morning, Kathy. Yes, Kathy noticed I'm in red. Um, my morning period is over. Uh, like any morning period, we have to move on with our lives. And I've realize that we are not going to get the country that we had back. In other words, um, I was mourning for the fact that we've lost the country that I fought for and served for in the Marine Corps. I don't know if you can see that my emblem there, but let me look at my Zoom picture for a moment. All right, so um, enough of that. Uh, but in any case, I've realized that we're not going to get the country I fought for back. And so what we have to do is we have to build a new country. And that's what we're in the process of doing here. And the particular essay that we're talking about really nails um, what brought me into Jungian psychology. I mean, really brought me in. I had already been studying it for 22 years at the point that the Red Book was published. But Kate Burns has essentialized the meaning of the Red Book, and she's really essentialized it for me. Uh, and that is the, the soul's desire to become new, Jung's journey, our our initiation. Okay, that's the name. That this is the second part of that talk, and what that means is we are following C.G. Jung through his own midlife crisis. He was um, really knocked off his pins by the loss of his relationship with Sigmund Freud, and and he was the instigator of that loss. And his midlife crisis amounted to him mourning the loss of that relationship. And then he decided what he would do for the rest of his life. So we could say about this that um, my mourning period, the last 8 months, has been my mourning for the loss of the country that I served and the realization that we have to move on. And it's high time we did that. And so I am no longer in mourning. I do wear black every day, but that's because it's my school's uniform. And that's a uniform only for the students, but I follow a principle of neurolinguistic programming, which is that if you mirror the person that you want to deal with, um, they will build a relationship with you better. And it's subtle. I acknowledge it's subtle, but nonetheless, I do it every day. I think I'm the only teacher in the school that actually wears black every day, as the kids have to. And that's my other reason for doing it. So I will be continuing with wearing black at school because it works, I believe. Um, and but I'm not going to be mourning in public any longer. Um, I know that we have to build something new, and we're in the process of doing it. Uh, and I've seen the future, and it does not involve our current administration, and so we have to suffer through uh, 3 more years of this. But in the end, it's going to be over. Um, And let's see. Kathy says, yeah, it didn't go on, I'm afraid. Art has 6 kids. Wow, Art, congratulations. And what am I reading from this morning? Oh, I'm reading from Kate Burns' article entitled Soul's Desire to Become New, Jung's Journey and Our Initiation, which in this case means that we are through the Red Book and through all these essays on the meaning of the Red Book, we are being initiated into a whole lot of Jungian psychology, which ultimately all boils down to this point that we've raised many times, which is the whole purpose of Jung's psychology is to make accessible the healing power of the unconscious. What that means is that we recognize, and all religions have recognized, that if we can uh, open up the healing power of our own unconscious, then that's what has to be done. And and so religions have been doing this blindly for thousands of years. They've done it intuitively and succeeded. They found what worked and what didn't work. They found that having marriage ceremonies and funerals worked for the congregation, for the group of people. And so they all have those ceremonies, even though they develop them independently. And so um, what we're being initiated into is Jung's process, which is quite convoluted, I acknowledge, for finding access to the unconscious, which he does through his active imagination, and which many of our followers have done through their active imagination over a long time. And so I'm glad to have you all here, and I am going to begin reading here momentarily. Kathy says that black is slimming. Yes, it doesn't show you're fat. Um, and I apologize. Art says, I don't have kids, but I am a kid at heart. Yes, indeed you are, sir. And we all are. And we try to find the ways that we can get through this veil of tears, which we call life. Um, and I found out something about function notation in the last few days, but particularly this morning. Uh, I have found myself uh, co-teaching in 3 different math classes. And the issue for that is that I haven't taken these. The last time I took any of these math classes was 1961. So I haven't studied any of them for 64 years. And so I'm having a bit of trouble getting uh, clued back into algebra 2, and geometry, where I co-teach. And I did find an easy uh, app to help me with that. And I was able to put it on my cell phone. So, and it was quite helpful in a number of ways. And I also found it through the help of the television series West Wing. And the significance of that is that we are problem solving animals. We solve problems in every minute of the day, basically. And so in West Wing, the President of the United States often says the line, "What's next?" And so the point is, we can, and in a movie like Apollo 13, um, where they have 85 problems that they're trying to deal with, and the Capcom is is giving them all these problems they have to deal with, and they say, I guess we'll take those one at a time. And really, the reality is that we have to take the problems that we face one at a time. So, for example, today, as I do every weekend day, I had to make a omelet for my wife. I didn't have to. I do it because I love her. Um, and she's now become reliant on that for her protein because she's become vegetarian, and and so I make sure that she has protein every weekend, and uh, I do that by um, making an omelet. And I've never written down my recipe, and every week it's a bit different. And it's really a calculus problem because in I put in chopped salsa, uh, chopped vegetables that are partially salsa, mild usually. And I put in cheese. Assuming I have it, I have grated cheese, but I have to grate the cheese. I have to know how much to make. And I use two eggs, one for each of us, and egg beaters to make a full cup. So it's like having two eggs each, but we only have half in the actual omelet. And the reason for that is that the eggs provide a binder for the omelet that you don't get if you use exclusively egg beaters. Um, and I made omelets with egg beaters exclusively for many years, and I made this change, and it worked quite well. Um, and so there are all these variables in the process, which becomes a calculus problem. And I'm not going to teach you calculus today, but it's very simple. It's multiple variables uh, graphed in hyperspace. So if you if you if I have apples and oranges, you're going to choose so many apples and so many oranges, and I can graph how many you will take, and I can graph how many everybody takes, and then I know how many apples and how many oranges to stock. If I add bananas, I can still graph that, but I can graph it in a cube with the line going out into the cube, so I can figure out how many bananas, apples, and oranges. But if I add grapes, now we're out of the space that we can imagine, the cube, um, height, length, and depth. And so I call it, and so what does an algebra problem decide? It decides what a curved line looks like. And so calculus is simply um, multiple variables, and in this case, grapes for the fourth dimension. And so you have to allow your mind to imagine what that variable would look like in space. So I call it, I explain very simply that calculus is a curved line in hyperspace. And on Wall Street, people have formulas for um, how they're going to invest in any given time, and those formulas have can have 300 variables. They can also have 3 million variables, and you throw them all in a computer, and the computer will calculate it. Human beings couldn't do that, and so therefore, that's what calculus is. It's quite simple, actually. And so, going back to my point, we decide in every minute what we're going to do in the next minute. And we have to be making decisions every minute of our lives, but we can only handle one at a time. And so uh, in Apollo 13, the astronauts say, well, I guess we'll take that one at a time. And the point is, we handle one problem at a time, and then we don't physically say it as Jim Bartlett does on the television series, but we psychologically say, what's next? What do I have to do next? And sometimes that's take a nap, and sometimes it's solve a difficult problem with our children, what have you. But so these are sort of important concepts generally. And so here uh, in the Red Book, Jung was doing active imagination. He sort of fell into doing it. Um, he called for his soul to talk to him, and he had to wait 45 days. He actually went and tried to meditate for 45 days before he heard anything. And after 45 days, he started to hear and then see these aspects of his own unconscious. And he found that he could talk to them in his active imagination. So he's conscious and he's imagining these various figures in his mind, and he's talking with them about what they mean, and therefore what they mean to him. And so we're seeing that she's saying this is Jung's journey. Jung does this, and the amazing thing about the Red Book is that about 80% of it occurs within 10 weeks, which would overwhelm almost anyone. Fortunately, Jung was a made psychiatrist at the time he was doing it, and so he was able to hold on. But at the same time, he knew that he had to create conscious anchors so that he could come back out of the unconscious. So, very often, people who are schizophrenic or whatever, they cannot get out of the unconscious and they're drowning in it. And so Jung would say to himself, I'm a medical doctor. I have patients coming for to see me tomorrow. I have a wife and 5 children, and I have to do such and such to keep the house in order and all the things that we go through in life. And so in our physical lives. And so he would keep anchored with those things, but he could meditate and also have these conversations with his own psyche. And that's what he was doing. And so, what Kate Burns means here is that we we are being initiated into how to have an interaction with our own psyche, and this is Jung's interaction with his psyche, but yours and mine will be different. And holding holding on during the time that you're trying to do it is quite dramatic. This is what happened to me in 1993 when I wrote my novel. I went into I didn't really realize it then, but I went into an active imagination, and I literally saw this novel in my mind's eye. I do not remember typing it. I typed it, but I do not remember that. What I remember is seeing what happened in my own mind's eye. And and I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't stop it. My anima figure at that time was a Japanese woman who was 15 years old, and she wore a beautiful kimono. And every time I saw her, she was wearing a beautiful kimono, and she was insisting that I write her story. And I had no idea what her story was, but I was forced to write it until it was over, until I had completed it. And after 8 months, I completed it, and then I was able to not do it anymore. And I haven't done it again since, at least not in that. But I was literally obsessed with doing that. Um, and And when writers say they have writer's block, what they mean is that they're not able to get back into that space, that unconscious space where their story can evolve. And so too many of them um, have decided that they could get back into it by either alcohol or drugs. And what they ended up doing is not curing their writer's block, but actually killing themselves um, with drugs or alcohol. And the stories of those incidents for artists are replete. So you should know what this is about. All of this, Jungian psychology, is all about the unconscious. And so we're trying to learn the healing power of the unconscious because we know everything. Really, when we're born, it's all there already. Just like a hummingbird knows how to do their travels from north to south and so on. It's all there. And what we do in school with our children is we unlock the things that they already know and make them available to them. And unfortunately, we do have some children who are resistant to having those things unlocked. They don't want to know, and they'd rather have their mommy take care of their lives for them. But life doesn't work that way. And so we have to unlock the things that they already know and show them how they work in the world. Um, and uh, the other creatures on Earth do that by um, example. They physically do the things that they want their offspring to do, and gradually the offspring learn to do it, and they do it the way their parents did it. And so the species can carry on. And so this is a very important idea, this chapter, Jung's journey and our initiation, in the sense that Jung had this experience, he recorded it, it came from his unconscious, he communicated with his unconscious, and he was able to come back and then write 20 volumes. But uh, he wasn't able to do that until he had had this experience. It was the prima materia of his life's work, and it was so much that he couldn't write everything that he thought of in the next 45 years of his life. And so it's up to us to understand what Jung was talking about. He isn't asking us to do have those experiences that he had. He's asking us to have our own experiences and to try to keep track of them and to recognize the healing power of the unconscious while having the appropriate caveats about getting lost in the unconscious. You don't want to get lost in the unconscious because then you've got problems, as I've indicated. So we're being initiated. Jung is showing us how he went about it. Each of us has our own way. He says, I'll be no teacher to you. You have your own way. Everybody has their own way. He's just he says the signposts have all fallen. He says this in the first chapter of the Red Book. The signposts have all fallen. You know, there's no guide to how to do this. Each of us has to do it ourselves. And what Kate Burns is pointing out is the Red Book is our initiation into the process that we're going to have to follow for the rest of our lives, recognizing that the unconscious will keep us healed, will keep us on the right track. But if we get too deeply into it, then we cause all kinds of problems. And so we see religious warfare, for example. I'm here because of the 80 Years' War, which occurred in the late 16th and early 17th century. And in the middle of that, an ancestor of mine came from Holland to New Amsterdam. And he and his wife and three children were five of the first 150 European settlers of Manhattan. But he was caught in the middle of a war where Spanish Catholics were coming up to Holland every summer to beat the Dutch back into being good Catholics. And the Dutch were Calvinists, they were Protestants, and they weren't going to take it. They're hard-headed Dutchmen, as I am. and and so they warred every summer, and then in the fall, the Dutch would flood their fields, and it would start to get cold, and the Spanish would go back to sunny Spain for the winter. And so my ancestor had his unconscious telling him, geez, I better get on a ship and go to this new world because what's going on here isn't good. And my progeny are not going to survive unless I get out of here. And that's what he did. So his unconscious guided him to pick up his wife and three children, three sons, and come to the new world. That was his answer. And, here I am. I'm the 13th generation of first sons since him. So I'm actually the patriarch of the Conover family. And Conover isn't even our name. And at the time he came, his name was Wolfert Gerritsen van Koenhoven, which meant, and his name was really Wolfert Gerritsen, which meant simply Wolfert, the son of Garrett. And when he came to the New World, he had to say where he was from. And so he was from this small village, which is now part of Amersfoort in the Netherlands. But in any case, it's a long way to explain that we all have to be initiated, and so that we can understand what our unconscious is telling us at any given time, and also to tap into the healing power. And so our initiation here is to see in the Red Book what Jung went through so that we too can go through something like that. And Jung's advice was that we should all have a Red Book. We should all, what the Red Book is essentially it's a scrapbook where Jung put images that were important to him, and he wrote down experiences and that sort of thing. It was a kind of journal that he worked on for 15 years. But that journal, he knew it was important, and it was important because it shows us what he went through. And by his example, we can see how difficult it is, how complicated it is, and we can somehow get there ourselves. So, Kathy, you've come alive in here, and so tell us what's your comment on everything I've said so far today?
Oh, everything? Oh,
Well, or
you don't want to give me
anything.
that much time.
No. I want to give you an opportunity to observe what you think is the most important.
Let's see. Couple standouts. Um, I don't know if Richard's been here since he said he wasn't going to come back, but I'm just super happy to see Richard. I just want to say that first because it's the most like recent standout and an exciting one because Richard and Skip and friends. Um, what happened when on that day when he said he wouldn't be here, that saddened me. It's not the first time I've been saddened in this group. It's one of the reasons I keep coming back to the group is because, when authentic emotion is stimulated, I think that's worth looking at.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's been intriguing, so I felt everything in this group from joy to celebration to disappointment to anger to sadness to neutrality to surprise. Okay.
Hmm.
So, and that I think, Skip, kudos to you. And I have felt those things while you have either been on that train or not been on that train, or we've been on opposing view trains, or, it seems like, sometimes I have felt things that you haven't noticed at all. And I'm
Yeah,
like, is
could
this
be. Yeah,
happening?
right.
um,
uh,
so anyway, the other big standout for me is your book.
which book is
The
that?
book that you wrote, what's the title of it again?
Which one? I've written four.
The what? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me not shortchange you. The one you were referring to today,
Okay,
your
that was my novel, which I wrote under a pen name, and I wrote it under a pen name because I was in the middle of my professional business career, and there's certain passages in that book which, in polite company, we would call erotic. And if we want to be honest, it's pornographic in certain parts of that book. And so I didn't want um, those facts to be attributed to me during my business career. And so I used a pen name, and, more or less the same reason everybody changes their name on the internet or doesn't. And so that book I wrote under the name David Garrett Son, Garrett Son,
how do you
uh,
spell that?
Gerritsan. And I used Garrett because that was the name of my first ancestor, and San, it means an honorific in Japan, where I have spent a lot of time. And you would have to read the novel in order to get the full explanation of why I used the name David and so on. Um, but um, but the name of the book is Meiko, Meiko. I'll put it in the chat here. And by the way, I'm not really trying to sell this book, but I will make people aware of its name. It's Meiko Memoirs of a Woman. And I didn't know really why I used that name when I used it, but thanks to my study in Jungian psychology, I now know that this is the memoir of my um, anima for the 32 preceding years. Okay, so it's the autobiography of what my feminine side went through from 1962 to 1993, the end of 1993. So it was really 32 years. And,
Wow.
and so everything that I wrote in that novel is true. It was, it's, uh, it's sort of a historical novel. And everything that happens in that novel happened to me, and I lived in Japan for 8 years. So everything that occurs in that novel happened to either me or someone that I know intimately. Okay, so it actually occurred, although names have been changed to protect the innocent. Um, but everything that is in that novel is a true story. Um, and it came from, and most people know this, that um, 1992, I believe it was, Norman Schwarzkopf came back from Gulf War One, and he wanted to parade through Washington. And although I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the Marine Corps with 23 years service, I served in Vietnam. I do not believe in the aggrandizement of the military. And so I was quite angry that the president at that time, President George H.W. Bush, was allowing this war parade. I called it the war parade at the end of Gulf War One. And so I refused to watch it. Although I lived on Capitol Hill at the time, I went for a long walk uh, so that I would not be tempted to watch it on television either. So I did not watch it at all, not a single minute of it. And instead I went for a walk. And while I was on that walk, I was trying to decide what I was going to do with my life. And I was in a kind of midlife crisis at that point myself. And I said, well, I guess I want to be a writer. And then I realized that I had actually made my whole career writing because I had caused people to invest in the things that I wanted to do for my whole career. And in fact, that occurred during my whole business career. People did things and we created things, including a public company, because I could write. Um, but at that point, I said, well, geez, I really like to write a novel. And the week before, I had read in the Wall Street Journal that an article about Michael Crichton, who had just completed Jurassic Park. And Michael Crichton was asked, how do you write a novel? And Michael Crichton said, well, you ask a question and then you answer it. And so in his case with Jurassic Park, his question was, what if dinosaurs could be brought back to life through the DNA that we currently have of dinosaurs? That's an interesting question that's been raised multiple times over the decades. But so the question was, you ask a question and then you answer it. And as I was walking, I realized that I did have a question, and it had been cooking in my unconscious for 32 years. And it was because when I was a high school student in Japan in 1962, we had a uh, housekeeper that lived in the house with us. And I was 15, she was about 23. And one Saturday morning, I asked my father, why is this young woman living here? You know, what's going on? I don't understand her background. And my father said, well, um, Japanese farm girls come to Tokyo to earn their dowry, quote unquote. This is what he said to me. Japanese farm girls come to Tokyo to earn their dowry and then they go home. And that's all he said to me. But I had no clue what that meant. And so the question um, that I was answering in this novel is uh, why? Why do Japanese farm girls come to Tokyo to earn their dowry, and how does that happen? So that's the premise of the novel. And the novel is the autobiography of that character, Mako, because I studied uh, Chinese, um, the word for beautiful in Chinese and Mandarin is Mei, and they actually call America Mei Guo, which means beautiful country. And in this case, I wanted to use beautiful, and ko is an honorific for children who are girls, or I guess it's honorific for all children, boys and girls. Um, and I later learned, long after I wrote this novel, that the character I used for May actually is Yoshiko. The name in Japanese is actually Yoshiko, but I called it Meiko, and my reason was that it meant beautiful child. And and it's the story of this 15-year-old farm girl um, from age 15 to age 75 until after she served as the first woman prime minister of Japan, and what happens in that 60-year period. So that's the story, what it's about. Um, but it was part of my own initiation into active imagination. And I had put my story away for 16 years. And so when the Red Book came out, I said, well, okay, if the greatest psychiatrist, psychologist of the 20th century went through all these things, then I guess I'm not crazy. And up till that time, I was a little bit concerned. And so I had to learn all this Jungian psychology, partially for that reason and partially because I saw the video, which is available here on YouTube. It's a 1-minute video. Jung is asked, do you believe in God? And Jung said, I have no need to believe. I know. And at that moment, I said to myself, I know. But it took me a decade, 10 years after that, before I could grok what that meant. And so now I know. And and I actually did a church like. In a church, I did a sermon called Finding the Living God in 2019. You can find it on this YouTube channel. And where I gave a 2 hour sermon on how one finds the living God. And this past week, I've made a decision to write a book called Finding the Living God. And so I will be doing that over time. I'm quite busy, but I'm going to write this book. If you want to find out the message of the book, you can watch my 2 hour lecture. But the book will be more detailed than that, I guess, and have references and so on. But anyway, does that answer your question? You know, look, I'm not a Jungian analyst and I'm not a psychologist. So I'm not telling anybody what to do, and I'm not, um, I'm certainly not giving clinical advice about psychology. I certainly do not intend to do that and have never done that in my program. But I think that what people have realized when they come back, as Kathy uh, has come back for many years now, um, what I do for the audience is I say something during the program that opens port into their own unconscious for everybody that listens seriously to this program, even one time, but for all the times that we've done it. And there's now about 1,675 videos on this YouTube channel. So we've done a lot of it. But what all of them do is uniquely make accessible to the audience their own unconscious, to the healing power of each person's unconscious. I don't know what I say that resonates with anyone. Okay, I don't know what I say, but I say things, and in the course of a 2 hour period, nearly everyone picks, finds something that puts them back in their own unconscious and causes them to think about their own lives. And therefore, it is healing in the same sense that a church service is healing. And
Well,
so,
I think that, yes, definitely to that. And the other thing I've noticed over many visits, some where I interact and some where I don't, is that a great deal also goes on, whether it's between you and a guest or uh, uh, in chat, sometimes completely uh, div- you know, uh, diverting from, your topics
right,
or whatever. And one of the things I've noticed is the way you hold space for that, insofar as uh, um, you allow, you don't intervene. You conduct a neutral space. You keep talking about whatever you want to talk about. You're going to let chat talk about what chat wants to talk about.
correct.
And when things go sour, uh, that includes those times.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
agree with that.
and you do that, and I know you do because um, I've observed you observing chat and responding to chat enough times to know that if you don't refer to a comment, that's not an accident. That is not an oversight.
Right.
And usually, sometimes, well, it's a variety of reasons, but one of them is, to hold space for people just to do their own process, because in context of what you just said, every interaction is an opportunity for the individual and the collective unconscious and conscious and the subconscious and the superconscious to grow, to experience, to do the dance of life through relationship, whether it's this or in person or, someone you've known your whole life or whatever it is. So um, that's one of the magical things about holding a group over the years too. And as people come and go, they do so for their own reasons, like Jordan.
Yeah, like
Things
Jordan.
happen. Things
Yeah,
happen, and things become more clear after real things happen as well. Like
correct.
in retrospect, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I was sensing. It was that,
Yes.
right? Without
Hmm.
going into that.
Right.
Okay, no need to go into that.
Right.
Today, to finish what I started and didn't finish, right before I popped on, I thought, Richard needs to come back. I hope Richard comes back. I hope Richard's feeling coming back. I really kind of want to be here when Richard's here. And I popped in and he popped in.
Yeah.
It was like boom, boom.
That's
And
that's a
that's that.
communication that I would actually believe in.
Yes. And that's the kind of synergistic
Synchronistic.
or psychic or connected, but the way I explain that is it's all in the field.
Yes, absolutely.
And for me, referring to Amela's comments, about, wondering about, people arguing it, the argument of God. Like for me, like Jung, I've always known. I came in knowing.
Hmm.
My I've never wavered.
Right.
Through the worst losses in my life, I've not wavered.
Hmm.
Um so there's just some really cool tie-ins that happen,
Yeah,
here.
I wrote a book called Tsunami of Blood. That's written in my own name, which I
Wow.
wrote in 2007, um, after the Gulf War, and uh, this was the second Gulf War, of course, and the one that started in 2003, thanks to our ex-president. Uh, and that those events kicked off a lot of things for me because I have spent a lot of time in the Muslim world, uh, and I believe that there were very improper things being said on television about the Muslim world. And I've been to 12 Muslim countries. I've been to Saudi Arabia 23 times, and I've spent at least 2 years of my life in India, which is the world's second largest Muslim country. And here's a question, stump the stars. What is the largest Muslim country in the world in terms of population? It's not in the Middle East.
The
Okay.
United Kingdom?
No, 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 no. It's Indonesia. Okay. So Indonesia has the largest Muslim population in the world. Uh, and uh, and I've spent a lot of time working with Muslims. I organized um, a business in Pakistan, and I tried to do one in Bangladesh too, but it just became too much, so I didn't do that in Bangladesh. But I've been to Pakistan 10 times, and actually we did form a company, and the man I started it with in early 1990s is still my close friend and is trying to get me back into business to this day. Um, and so a lot of things happen, and I think I'm going to leave the chat for now because I do want to get into this article, but um,
Yeah, there's a couple
does it
people who want you to read.
Yeah, which I will do.
Yeah,
And so I just want to mention that whatever you say in chat probably will not be recorded
it's
uh,
not.
by YouTube, because when
It
you
isn't.
go back to the replay of this session, you will not see the chat.
That is correct.
And so just for your information, if it makes you feel easier. Okay, so I'm on page 219. I'm reading the second part of this article called Soul's Desire to Become New, Jung's Journey, Our Initiation. I'm on page 219 of volume 2 of the Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Murray Stein and Thomas Arst. Um, and so I will continue on the last paragraph of page 219. Not long after the series of visions that anticipated the impending world war, which is what those visions are recounted in the Red Book in the very first chapter, um, the vision of the murder of Siegfried brought Jung to ask of himself whether such a vision might mean that he must commit suicide. Now, why did he worry about that? Because Siegfried was a hero of Germanic culture, and in his dream, he and a small dwarf murdered Siegfried. And so that's why he was saying that. So he said, I'll read the sentence again. Not long after the series of visions that anticipated the impending world war, the vision of the murder of Siegfried brought Jung to ask himself whether such a vision might mean that he must commit suicide. In the dream, Jung murders Siegfried, an act that greatly disturbed his sense of value for the heroic endeavor that had characterized his own life up to that point. A redeeming insight finally presented itself. He realized that the dream suggested that he was called to disperse with his self-satisfied and highly adept professional persona that expressed the heroic, inquisitive, and ambitious youth who had encountered many challenges and accomplished venerated expertise. He felt compelled to submit himself humbly to the inner imperative that was making itself known within him through a perpetual enactment of dreams and visions. The wisdom of his soul, obliging him to listen and to learn its laws and to expose himself to its judgment, ripe for discovery and integration into consciousness, beckoned him. Just such a just such a process describes the task of initiation. Language pertinent to the experiences of initiation permeates the many dreams and visions disclosed and elaborated in the Red Book. A successful initiation embodies three essential phases: the call to attend, a struggle culminating in crisis, and a curing renewal. Jung's poetic yet intellectual discourse boldly reveals his awareness of a call, of a call, an invitation, an imperative to return to soul, to his inner life, and its vital striving to develop a transcendent function of consciousness, an expanded attitude toward life. Consider, for instance, as soon as the main function is deposed, there is a chance for other sides of the personality to be born into life. What happens when the main function, one's typical and conditional attitude toward life, i.e., everything a person means when enlisting the pronoun I, um, is submitted to scrutiny along with the terrifying yet ineffable beauty of the numinous. When an individual encounters such a summons, the ego consciousness, whose primary interest resides in maintaining its own power in the status quo, will resist, dig in its heels, refuse to move, and finally hold on for dear life. Psychic energy previously available for outer life flows inward, and one feels lack of enthusiasm, vigor, volition, i.e., libido or life energy. Thoughts of suicide may break into consciousness and lurk amid the fear, even though such thoughts intrude uninvited. Okay, and I would just say on this that um, as many of you know, I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New York, but I lived in D.C. from 1986 and in Annapolis, Maryland since 1995, and at no time have I felt the call to get myself licensed in the state of Maryland. And I turned my back on my 8 years in the law, including 3 years of law school and 5 years of practice, because I was no longer called to it. And I had a very similar transition into something else. And this happened 3 years into my practice of law. I really decided I wanted to be in business, not practicing law. And so became one of the first attorneys to attend business school and have both degrees, which I do. Okay, so I'm going to read on here then. So in any case, when you have this transition, thoughts of suicide might break into consciousness and lurk among the fear, even though such thoughts intrude uninvited. And this is a destroyer, the outer life circumstance that necessitates some kind of intimidating change, brings a person against an obstacle, a seemingly impenetrable wall of indecision that always arrives through an act of fate. Such a challenge, which is often disguised as catastrophe, includes any situation that drastically changes the current state of things, a loss of love, profession, health, or a combination of these. And I would just add to this that when the crash of 2008 occurred, I was in business and one of my neighbors was in business, and we both did have suicidal ideation at that time. I said to myself, perish that thought, because I wanted to see how this movie comes out. He, on the other hand, did commit suicide. So this is a very real thing. And one first responds with resistance. The prospective initiate, feeling frightened and alone, will often seek refuge in familiar habits, a variety of addictions, many of which provide the additional security of appearing healthy and even beneficial to self and world, provide the most readily available cover for the ego clinging to status quo. However, in any case, the familiar self will experience a fall, and feelings best described as some aspect of profound grief complicated by guilt will ensue. Jung's predisposition toward curiosity led him to take on the poverty of spirit in order to partake of the soul. Such a decision may sound perplexing, but anyone who crosses the threshold of addiction and or grief has already entered into spiritual poverty. However, if one does take on poverty, i.e., embraces humility and submit to the fear and grief inherent in intense inner conflict, a way opens through which suffering may transform into meaning through exploration, through answering the call of the soul. The initiate becomes chosen rather than victimized, purposeful rather than a prisoner of fate, a searcher for meaning rather than a follower of creeds of any other preconception or any other preconceptions. See, I'll stop for a moment. Yeah, I'm just going to leave the YouTube chat to run. I don't strongly want to take on any of the positions being taken there. Okay, members of traditional cultures who enter into the ritual of shamanic initiation have already suffered the throes of confrontation by unseen forces, often since childhood. Rites include the task of traversing a tortuous underground passage that leads to a larger chamber where isolation creates conditions that almost certainly foster spiritual torture, i.e., torture experience is a scourge um, by destructive spirits. Jung explained his trial uses a tone, Jung explaining his trial uses a tone of warning juxtaposed with challenge and hope. Everything will continue to you, and you will be sparing nothing, the mercy and the torment. Through courageously withstanding the burden of some version of dismemberment, traditional initiates report experience of mysterious enantiodromia, a process by which an extremely polarized situation or attitude becomes its own opposite. Torture by complete skinning and scattering of bones, disembowelment, or dissolution carried out by destructive spirits becomes rememberment, replacement of bowels by adamantine stones, or molding of a purified body by constructive spirits. Subsequently, the initiate experiences a changed attitude towards self, other, and life. Rebirth is achieved. And if you live long enough, you'll experience this many times. Um, about 4 years ago at age 75, I was pretty retired. I mean, I'm on Social Security, and so is my wife. And I wasn't doing much around the house. Um, and and there in the newspapers there were these insistent calls for teachers because we didn't have enough teachers in our community, and the school district was desperate to find teachers. Well, it so happens that I'm a certified social studies teacher since 1968 and permanently since 1974. However, in my whole career from then until age 75, I had never taught a day K through 12, not a day. And, but these insistent um, pl pleas for teachers uh, said to me, well, maybe I better look into this. And And so I went ahead and started to uh, part-time teach to substitute. And I found I rather liked it. And I was doing things that I had never done or imagined before. For example, for 3 months, I taught art. And many of my students now remember that I was their art teacher 3 years ago. And uh, so, in any case, I had this call. The call came through the newspapers, but I recognized it as calling me. So I started to teach. And then, uh, because I was accepted as a substitute, I taught as a substitute for a year. And then I became a full-time special education teacher, and knowing absolutely nothing about it at the time. But that was 2 years ago that I became a special education teacher for the first time with zero knowledge. I'd never taken a course in special education, and I'd never done the job. And so I'm now in my third year of teaching special education, and I find I like the work, and I do feel called to it. So therefore, I'm continuing, and that's the way my life has been throughout. So there's can be more than one call over time. Um, okay, all right. So so I've been reborn as a rebirth that is achieved. Anyway, I've been reborn as a school teacher now, and I'm happy with that decision. Um, so, without the benefit of time-honored ritual, persons in our time most often experience the soul's periodic attempt at renewal as an acute ebbing of life energy, energy that has been reaching outward into a myriad of projects and interests, flows back into the unconscious, a backward movement that results in its confusion, lack of interest in typical ventures, and general malaise. The medical community will often gather such symptoms into a diagnosis of depression. Medications prescribed may bring a feeling of relief for a time. The individual may explore alternative courses of action and will sink down into the wisdom within, or alternatively continue through life without confidence, without clear intentions, and without broad perspective. Not to mention developing a dependence on pharmaceuticals. A deafening call of the soul for expanded experience, expression, and attitude toward life has sounded, but without words. If the individual resists overwhelming temptation to chase after the empty promises of quick relief and turns attention to the place where the energy now resides, in the inner self, a wealth of images will coalesce to form a symbolic passage out of the initiatory chamber, the unconscious. Prayer, yoga, I'm sorry, no matter how much time one routinely spends in meditation, prayer, yoga, or religious commitments, time in the initiatory chamber exacts a release of preconceptions and a relinquishing of habits. One must devote time and attention to the images and messages, no matter how frightening or immoral or heretical, and follow their lead through the assorted solitary activities that amplify the particular dilemma at hand. It all starts with turning one's curiosity to the calling. which typically makes itself known through complicated life situations that seem to have no solution, very often accompanied by unexplained inner experiences such as dreams or visions. Loss of appetite or other responses of the body may ensue. Um, Limited attention to detail, difficulty focusing, and unusual struggle with organizational skills may trouble cognitive functioning. Abbreviated enthusiasm of previously enjoyable activities may torment one's emotional state. Essentially, a person who experiences loss also experiences the challenge of confronting a trial that will move according to an ancient initiatory pattern. Life altering confrontations with every conviction presupposes and is an indisputable law that one holds unassailable will come into play. Again, the question arises, how is it that a 21st century individual may hope to weather such a call? The answer, one faces up to the imperative to sacrifice precious time, which most often also means financial resources in order to contain the enormous tension of an inner war between preconceived positions and the knowledge of oneself and the knowledge of, sorry, I'll reread that sentence and take a drink at the moment. The answer, one faces up to the imperative to sacrifice precious time, which most often also means financial resources, in order to contain the enormous tension of an inner war between preconceived positions and the knowledge of oneself, which promises to defy many collectively held notions, all the while suspending a fierce desire to discover a solution. Nietzsche's maxim, idleness is the beginning of all psychology, gains clarity during the challenge of a call. In order to commune with one's own soul, a person needs time and solitude during which to explore the inner cosmos. Furthermore, an individual in the world of today greatly improves chances of success of an initiatory cycle by employing a credentialed analytical psychologist. There's a plug for analytical psychologists. The Red Book offers one man's experience, and it offers inspiration, wisdom, and hope. Jung's tireless search into the messages contained in a wealth of images, as well as his meticulous research and recording of the messages revealed to him, offers witness to the courageous sacrifice together with the abundance of reward inherent in devotion. Yet he again implores others not to try and imitate him. This play that I witnessed it is my play, not your play. It is my secret, not yours. You cannot imitate me. My secret remains virginal, and my mysteries are inviolable. They belong to me. They belong to me and cannot belong to you. You have your own. Jung's experience resembles a mythic underworld journey. He issues the imperative that one must go through the gate of the soul, utterly poor, miserable, humiliated, and ignorant. This is much like the journey of Inanna, goddess of beauty, desire, and political power in the ancient Sumerian pantheon, who descends to the underworld through 7 gates and sacrifices a piece of her regalia at each gate. Hurled into the state of temporary madness characteristic of possession by unseen forces, the initiate faces a tense collision of opposites. Everything serious is also laughable. Everything fine is also brutal. Everything good is also bad. Everything high is also low. Everything pleasant is also shameful. Here, nothing makes sense and everything is in flux. Sacrifice of everything previously held as reasonable and valid must be made in order to be released to roam freely with those things considered unreasonable and invalid. Jung says of sacrifice that it is the very reverse of regression. It is a successful canalization of libido. Every person Every person who has been seized by creative madness knows the intensity knows the intensity of such a movement. Jung says to soul, "You weave the thickest darknesses. I am like a madman caught in your net, but I yearn. Teach me." Again, the reader receives something of a warning that finishes with heroic curiosity coupled with humble submission, willingness, and even yearning for connection to one's inner foundation, or to one's inner fountain, for reflection, for access to the unknown parts of oneself, furthers and expands experience of the full potential of oneself, together with the knowledge of one's individual way along this journey we call life. Just think about that for a moment while I look at how many more pages this goes. Okay, and the time is 11:25. So it's 5 more pages, um, and it looks like we can complete it today. So I'm going to attempt to do that by plowing ahead. Yes, Kathy, I absolutely agree with you that we need to stay centered when folks say things against our grain. That's to all of us, and that's certainly required. And we have to understand that everyone has a journey. Everyone, regardless of whether they're depressed or not, has a journey, and we have no idea what that other soul has been through. And so we need to be respectful of that. We need to respect the divinity in each one of us. And of course, some religions have um, manifested that. For example, in Hinduism, it's customary to fold your hands to one another, and that's uh, saying, "I recognize the divine in you." And so that's what we should be doing. We may not be able to do it consciously in an American life, but we should try. Um, and Cherie says, one has to understand American history before 1776. Dr. Gerald Holm, Afro-American History, was written over 50, has written over 50 books. We all share the same journey to survive or not. Um, yeah. And so in terms of African American history, um, some of my children, for example, are resistant to the pledge to the flag in school every day, and they refuse to rise to it. And a couple of times I've explained to them why I speak the Pledge of Allegiance with gusto, and that is, you know, regardless of what may have happened in the past, and lots of things that were horrific did happen in the past, and formal slavery, although we have different kinds of slavery today, but formal slavery ended in this country 160 some years ago, and therefore um, we have to recognize that all of us have this country that we have to live in, and our progeny have to live in also. And we need to build a new country where everyone can live. The United States is a country that has over 210 national origins among its population. We have every religion on earth and every um, race, creed, and color, and we all have to live together. And so, learning how to do that is, a lifelong job for our whole country and for the collective unconscious of our country. The sooner we realize that, the better off we'll be. Um, so, yeah, okay. So I'm going to read on. So I'll read the last sentence again. Willingness and even yearning for connection to one's inner fountain, for reflection, for access to the unknown parts of oneself furthers and expands experience of the potential of oneself, together with the knowledge of one's individual way along this journey we call life. The initiate enters a state of crisis, which exacts a need for razor sharp discernment and pivotal decision. And this is the same crisis that we in the United States face in our current affairs every day of the week. Everything that belongs to one's highest value wants rebirth and strives toward the west, like the sun that will rise anew in the east. When the struggle through thickest darknesses apprehends the ego consciousness of a 21st century individual who knows little about how to negotiate what may seem like a horror, at least like an innate yearning. Societal structures, cultural traditions, and religious creeds often offer little support. Solitude without electronics, attention to inner images, and time for play without toys would challenge to the core the modern person's unacknowledged, even unrealized addiction to constant diversions, abundant and expected, clamoring from all corners in every second of our daily life experience. One needs time to emerge from a life-threatening ordeal, whether from within or in outer life. And I just give an example. When I was going through my midlife crisis at age 40, one of the things that I did was I turned off the radio in my car, and I immediately realized that my inner life was incredibly interesting. And I had all the entertainment I needed and all the advice I needed from my inner self. And so, as long as you're listening to the radio when you're driving, you are blocking out your inner life. And so, I would encourage everyone that has uh, a difficult mood to try to block out the outer life that is blocking you from getting to the inner life and just sit quietly. And it doesn't take long. It can take as little as 5 minutes, and all of a sudden you're going to start to get information from your unconscious that you probably need. Okay. Um, okay, reading on. Escape from constant commotion may prove impossible, but to turn one's attention inward requires a simple about face, a revolution, a turning around. If an ominous and threatening creature chases one through the night, the one chased and running for dear life may merely turn round, whereupon the creature transfigures into a more amenable, even helpful image. Similarly, if noise pollution, air pollution, and the disturbing eyesores of advertisement and industry chase one through the days, mindful inner awareness renders the intruders powerless. Jung realized that he must grope through what lies at hand, embrace the worthless and the worthy with the same love. Without the inward gaze, the the devotional attention to the images of one's soul, in addition to having a dialogue with one's other objective person who has experience and expertise to foster interpretation of such images, no amount of no amount or cocktail of psychopharmaceuticals will ultimately change the situation that leads to a diagnosis of depression and or anxiety disorder. The medical community debates endlessly the question of whether the medication even alleviates the symptoms of depression and anxiety after allowing for an initial honeymoon period of relief that can be attributed to a placebo effect. The placebo effect in research of this kind would be you're a test subject and they're giving you a pill that will do absolutely nothing for you. Um, it might as well be um, flour and not a medication. You know. Okay, reading on. What one has cultivated in outer life, in most successful or of circumstances, eventually culminates in striving achieved, goals attained, and recognitions collected on an undistant shelf. ego consciousness attaches to its memories when the current environment starts to erode the image of oneself so tirelessly achieved. It cannot see the future, and the present stands permeated with outworn identity longing to renew itself. Consider the professor who longs to write poetry, the doctor who longs to play music, the lawyer who longs to write a novel, the laborer who longs to carve flutes, the man who longs to become a woman, or the woman who longs to become a man. Little does one know that beyond the ongoing war between opposing forces from within, a garden awaits. An inner landscape beckons the one reduced by agonizing loss of everything once identified as myself to a mystery as vast and as fascinating as the limitless cosmos. The soul invites inquisitive and thirsty wanderers to drink from the inner spring of renewal. Observe Louis Darnardo's words as he enlists Meister Eckhart in the film Jacob's Ladder. In this scene, he tries to soothe the main character whose post-traumatic stress from wartime experience has landed him in a state of confusion between outer experience and his dreams. Quote, "The only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life, your memories, your attachments. They burn them all the way, but they're not punishing you, they're freeing your soul. If you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. If you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth." Unquote. In the cave of initiation, the devils that tear apart the old body of everything one has become, but is no longer, those devils of destruction become angels of construction, forming a new body. Through enduring the greatest torture to become smelted anew in the connection with the primordial beginning, which at the same time is what has been and what is becoming, one emerges with adamantine strength to serve both soul and world. Nothing less and nothing more commanding than renewal conveys the cure. Rebirth brings a restoration of energy, but also necessitates tending civilization, devotion, mind, also necessitates tending, cultivation, devotion, mindfulness, and love. A curing rebirth brings one into a state of infant perspective, every bit as determined to proclaim itself and every bit as fragile as a baby emerging from its mother's womb. However, in a world that denies and even denounces, and at best ignores the evolving of an individual soul, renewed consciousness brings predictably an encounter with resistance. The ones who have accompanied the initiate thus far, companions, friends, family, or colleagues, now feel the presence of a stranger. In fact, the initiate who recently emerged from a time of struggle feels like a stranger to that person previously known as self. The rite of tonsure, shaving of the head, among assorted religions uh, among assorted religious orders offers an apt depiction of the nascent identity emerging to fill a life of devotion. Jung realized that to become and to continue becoming an authentic individual, only devotion to his own soul could free him. Transformations required Jung to lock the past with one key, with the other open the future. Then he reflects on what his process means for his life. The miracle of transformation commands. What does this miracle command? It commands living a symbolic life, a life of integrity in which decisions emerge from careful consideration of polarizing influences, and where a spirit of faith in life and love prevails. Living one's cure impels embracing in all humility the way forward through darkness, because the future is always dark. If you look for a light, you fall first into an even deeper darkness. Current society offers little support for discerning one's own way. Western culture, which has gripped the world, provides much that may interrupt rather than further one's progress, much that needlessly limits the development of ideas rather than supporting their journey through formulation and maturation, and leading finally to manifestation. Jung advises well-being is a better judge. Continuing in a state of cure means intrepid self-care. It means knowing the desires of the innermost rather than chasing what glitters in a society tormented by greed. It means entering the stream of life, the joy and sorrow of living oneself. One emerges from the one emerges from the cave with the glow of an adamantine body, the wings of a dragon, wisdom through serpentine longing, and the acuity of a crow, yet also one emerges as a beast of burden who serves its master, which is transformation. Emerging from the initiatory trial means emerging from the initiatory trial means your need and your longing and your pain and suffering have birthed a renewed access of meaning. You have sacrificed your cleverness in the world and submitted to the simple-mindedness of the inner world in order to address and to engage with your soul. You have become the humble frog in order to converse with the dragon of wisdom, which harbors your own idea. In the midst of suffering and loss, a world-weary individual bends a knee to something unknown that reveals itself through one's mindful attention. The ineffable unknown that defies description bathes in love the one who searches for healing balm. Life continues with renewed energy, purpose, resolve, perspective. The world again becomes a place that piques curiosity, stages the imagination, and fuels inspiration. Every initiation in every lifetime invites the initiate to embark upon and cultivate a unique, sacred devotional path, clearing the enigma along the way. The entire person, both conscious and unconscious components, face an inner, I'll read that again. The entire person, both conscious and unconscious components, faces an inner command to explore new avenues, to birth the self anew continually, so as to explore and develop a potential for unlived part of life. If one depotentiates the horror of thickest darknesses, by apprehending them and traversing their torturous trails, the courageous initiate may discover a placid pond of enrichment, a new day of broader perspective. At the end of the Red Book, in a section called Scrutinies, Jung asks the question whether the work of redemption is imperative. Certainly not, he answers. If one can endure a given condition and does not feel in need of redemption. However, it seems that those who find themselves incarnated as human beings harbor a longing for meaning and purpose in life. One who cultivates an ability to endure a given condition sacrifices all hope of discovering meaning and purpose in life. A situation that leads to despair and even murder and or suicide, the farthest extreme of untreated depression, not through medications or herbs or specially formulated supplements, and not through the latest miracle diet, and not through the latest formulated workshop, and not through devoting oneself to any religious order anywhere does one find a cure for one's intrinsic suffering that has landed one in the throes of a severe depressive episode. There is the panacea outside oneself for curing a sick soul. Only through entering the chamber of loneliness and defeat and accompanying one's longing does a person emerge from depths of fear and loathing and despair, carrying renewed enthusiasm like a talisman to continue the great foraging of life. Consider Jung's words cited above. Quote, "My secret belongs to me and cannot belong to you. You have your own." Unquote. These words both challenge us to the inner duel and encourage us with the hope of victory, of receiving the prize, of emerging with a renewed raison d'etre, a reason for being. Okay, that is the end of that. Okay, so we've now come to the end of today's session. We have about 10 minutes left. And I'm going to once again share with you my way of communicating with my unconscious. Okay, and the reason is, and let me just make sure that I can do this. I need to look at my recent pictures. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to bear with me. As I've told you many times, I suppose, my way of communicating with my unconscious now, it's changed over time, is to follow the lesson of Colleen Kibert, who has taught me the process of Rocky. So if you want to follow her way, you can buy her book called Art and Spirit by Colleen Kibert. And I will put a link, or I'll put the name of it in the chat here in a minute. But I've come to the conclusion that I should do a large painting for each of my grandchildren. I have 10 of them, So it's a major task which I've set for myself. Now, these paintings are my communication with my own unconscious. So each morning at 6 a.m., I rise and I put my paints out. I use watercolor, but you could use anything you wanted, or you can use your own method of reaching your unconscious. But my way right now, which seems to be working very well, is I set out my paints and then I wait until my unconscious tells me uh, what colors to use, where to use, move my hand, and these result um, in abstract images, images that are um, have no definite image. I'm not trying to paint a tree or anything like that. I'm just doing what my unconscious tells me. Um, and most of the time, I do that with no direct intention whatsoever. I just listen to my unconscious. However, I do have one grandson who is called, I think he's probably called to the ministry. He's decided to go to Hillsdale College in Michigan, which is um, Christian evangelical college. It's a liberal arts school. And he's not nearing his 21st birthday yet, which is the time I want to give my grandchildren their painting. But over the last couple of weeks, I've realized that, oh, by the way, you have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and she's not going to reach 21 for another 16 years. And then I add up 16 years to my current age and realize that I will be 95 before my granddaughter has has reached the magic age of majority. And so therefore I decided to go ahead and give out these paintings to my grandchildren as they become available. And so my grandson um, in Michigan, who's going to Hillsdale College, um, is the fifth in a series. I have five more that I have to address, but in his case, it came to me that I should paint a cross because I know that he's called uh, to Christianity. Um, and especially Protestant Christianity. So I decided to paint a cross, and um, and it didn't take me very long to complete the painting, but I'll just show it to you. And please keep in mind that uh, no photograph can possibly replicate what I did because I used, for this painting, I used only fluorescent and metallic paints. So it's quite shiny, and photographs cannot pick up the shininess. So if you have the actual original in real life, you would uh, look at it obliquely in the sun, and you would see a different part of the painting light up. And the original, when it's on the wall, uh, will look different in every minute of the day because light changes in your room during the day, and especially when you have direct sunlight. And so I used a lot of gold. I'm going to show you one version of a picture, but there are, um, I, I've taken 5 pictures with different obliques instead of directly down, a little bit oblique, so you can see the shine in a different part of the painting. And so I'll show you that now. And keep in mind that I did it with this particular grandson in mind, and I will ultimately give him this gift. So since he's not anywhere close to 21 yet, I probably will give it to him at Christmas time this year, but I haven't exactly decided. But in any case, so the mission was to honor this grandson's calling and to paint a cross and a Protestant cross. And so here it is. Let's see, maybe it's not here. There it is. Okay, so there it is. And as I say, it's on the oblique, so you can only see one side, the upper right corner that is shining back at the camera, and you can't see the rest of the shine there. But I will show you a series that will give you a sense of the shine on all sides. But this is looking at it one way, and then a second way um, shows more of the shine in the lower right and on the lower part of the painting. Then this is his third one, and this is showing the shine on the lower part of the painting. But as you see, the upper right looks very dark, and that's a function of the paint itself, the gold paint, which is fluorescent, and therefore you have to have the light hitting it just the right way in order to see it. But this is the third oblique. This is the fourth, which sort of catches the light and the fire coming out in all directions. And then this is the fifth one. And anyway, so that's these 5 paintings. Or it's one painting, but it's shown to you in 4 or 5 different obliques so that you can appreciate the luminosity of the painting itself. I'm afraid I am going to have this photograph for printing, and in the photograph for printing, I probably will ask the printer to use an oblique that shows this version, showing the hopefulness and the light shining out in one direction, keeping in mind that the original is really nothing like this, because you would have to see light, and the painting would have to be mounted with at least one major light over it so that the shine comes out of it. But in any case, that's what I've done. And see what various people say. Thank you, Kurt. Kathy, she says it's beautiful, it's radiant. Mela says, when you raise twins, each one might grow up differently. Absolutely. And Kimberly likes it. Cherise says she likes it. Mela, furthermore, with almost 2 decades of experience in psychic rehabilitation, what I can tell you is that sure, the systems are not perfect. However, the same amount. And Richard says, I love the colors and the shine. Tanner House says, new life, nice. It's not only not perfect, it's young and incomplete and doing more ultimate harm than good. And Mela says it's very yellow. Well, Uh, the intention of it is that it shows radiance. Um, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the painting and you're not. And let's see what's going on here. Yeah, apparently the YouTube has stopped because, or I don't know why, but I'm going to have to uh, may have to rejoin in order to um, see the YouTube chat. Uh, let's see. Noah says, amount of energy can be used to seek help, but the problem is a person committing those crimes does not understand or accept what they are doing is wrong, like how the cross itself appears white instead they justly justify their actions based on their own conscious experience. Um, and and Richard says, radiance is the perfect name for it. Um, I'm calling this Nathan's cross because it's the cross that Nathan will have to carry into the future. My grandson Nathan will have to carry into the future. Let me. What has happened here? Um, I'm going to share it again in the hope that um, that will get my YouTube link going again, because that seems to have. Hmm. Okay. Uh, I guess it's working now. Yeah. All right. I my YouTube uh had a hiccup and it stopped, but I'm now seeing myself on the screen, so I must have gotten it going again. Yeah, and I guess Richard is suggesting a different name for Nathan instead of Nathan's cross, but I'm going to I understand that is a little bit less of a it's a little softening of the message, but as his grandfather, I know that once I give this to him framed, which I would do at Christmas time, um, it will be very hard for him not to have it near him for his lifetime. And of course, all these colors are all metallic as well, so they all shine. Um, and so, this is one where, in most cases, I would have to sell the original for maybe $5,000 because of the time put into them. But this one, if I were selling these, I would almost not be able to set a price on it. It's priceless because it's impossible to create a print of it. The print will not reflect the shininess of the original painting. So the original painting would be much more expensive. But anyway, um, if anyone has an interest in me painting a cross for them, I will be happy to do so. However, I will not be able to paint Christ on the cross simply because I don't want to be um, I don't want to be trying to put something that's an actual intended image on it. And this particular cross was painted um, freehand. I didn't measure anything. I just started to paint, and uh, and I used a very large brush for most of it. And so it wasn't intended to have detail in it. And so if a Catholic could live with a cross that doesn't have Christ on the cross, then you're more than welcome to talk to me about a commission, in which case it wouldn't cost that much money, but I would, a commission is a commission. So if you want a cross like I've created for Nathan, um, that's created only for you, I would accept a commission. Uh, but we'd have to talk about what the price of that commission would be. Um, and mainly because it would be meaningful to you. And I actually did I did a postcard size for this as a study before I actually painted. The particular one I showed you was 18 by 24. I would be willing to paint any size in this, but obviously the bigger, the more detail it will have in it. Um, Richard says, it's wonderful, Skip, and prophetic to me. I hope it's prophetic. I think it's prophetic. Um, and I'm not an artist, a professional artist. I'm not a professional artist, and so I'm not um, not suggesting that anyone who wants a cross is going to have to pay big money for such a thing, but I would charge based on the time I think it would take me to paint it. Um, and So Mela mentioned Systema Mundatotius can be found in appendices of the Red Book, Reader's Edition, page 561. And that is, I read that so very long ago that it is in my deep unconscious. Um, okay. Okay, so I seem to have come to the end of my story for the day, um, and Mel says the channel does not provide mental health advice. Yes, this channel does not provide mental health advice. I am not a mental health professional. I have no formal training in that regard. I've been on self-study with Jung for 37 years. So, uh, and Kathy says, and we don't come in to tell each other what to do either. And yeah, and Amela says, if you are in danger of hurting yourself or others, please call 988. Absolutely. There is a self-help line. And Richard, I know I have a lot to catch up on the comments, and that's not going to be possible. And by the way, these emergency numbers are very important. I took a fall yesterday, a very serious one, um, where I was coming up my steps, and I'm not even sure how it happened. I was turning to the right, fortunately, to pick up some packages, and I lost my balance and fell backward and fell across a concrete flower pot that was filled with a cactus, believe it or not. And I hit right in the middle of my back, uh, very painfully. And unfortunately, my Apple Watch and my cell phone failed me. My Apple Watch came on and said, "It looks like you've taken a fall. Shall I call 911?" And I didn't respond, and it had this countdown from 30 seconds before it was going to call emergency services, which it did not do. About 15 seconds into it, it says, do you want me to call emergency services? And um, I said yes. And it then comes on with this countdown again saying, I'm calling emergency services 30, which is, I guess, a 30-second countdown, except the 30-second countdown never happened. Fortunately, my wife was right there and saw me fall and saw that the Apple Watch and cell phone were not functioning properly, and finally did call 911 herself. And I had emergency services come down and help me to stand up and make sure I didn't have damage to my back. And I did not have damage. Well, I don't think I had damage to my backbone. I certainly had a big bruise and a big scrape because that that flower pot was made out of concrete, but I survived, thank God. And I said to Deb, we need to live in a place that has elevators rather than stairs. And that's still true. Uh, and she said, well, no, because elevators sometimes don't work. And um, this morning I said, well, sometimes elevators don't work, but they do work most of the time. And so I would have to climb far fewer stairs and take far fewer risks. As many of you do not know, I am handicapped from the waist down. I'm not paralyzed, but I have 3 joint replacements. I walk with a cane. I use a walker in my work at school. And I have great difficulty climbing stairs. It's really a Keystone Cops event every day. And and so the the people who came on the ambulance said, "Is that the way you climb the stairs every time?" And I said, "Oh yeah, this is my normal way to climb stairs." But anyway, anyway, it's over, except I have a little healing to do on my epidermis and my bruise on my back, but I haven't injured myself permanently this time. But it's always iffy. Um, and it's about 15 months since I had a major fall like that before. Um, and so we have to be careful. Gravity is not your friend. Do not fall down if you're an adult. Um, it's for children. Children can fall and bounce back quite easily because their bones are not quite so brittle as adult bones are. But uh, all this began with uh, a fall I had in 1990, where I broke my ankle in two places. And very simply, I just fell down and and it's affected me for the rest of my life. So anyway, um, Sherry says, I just found out a friend of mine who also served in the military has had a genetic disorder disease since birth. He is 57 and can't have surgery. 1 out of 10 million has it. He would have sentences cut off. Yeah. So actually, you should hate falling down and throwing up, and we adults need to take care, because if we fall, it may affect you for the rest of your life, if not kill you. And obviously, if I had been about maybe 15 to 18 inches farther to the right, I could have easily broken my neck on that flower pot. So it's a non-trivial issue. You know, I could have ended it right there, but anyway, I didn't. So we dodged it for the moment. Um, and and Kathy says it wasn't your day. Well, actually, it was my day. I was very lucky that I didn't seriously injure myself. I didn't break my back and I didn't break my neck. So I feel very lucky. Yeah, it wasn't my day to die. Yeah, thank God. And so anyway, uh, I have to move on. So have a wonderful day. At 3 p.m., I will be watching the WNBA semifinal in the WNBA playoff between the Indiana Fever and the Los Angeles Aces. And it's become a very interesting season to be watching the WNBA, because they lost Caitlin Clark after only 13 games this season. She was injured and put out for the season. And so the staff of the Indiana Fever has been extremely effective. They had a lot of other injuries, and they've been extremely effective in finding people who hadn't, were beyond their contract limit and who are playing on a if a team calls me, I will come type basis as a substitute. And they've very successfully brought several of those women in who've made a big contribution to the Fever. And so even without Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever is in the semifinals. And last year, with the Caitlin Clark, they had lost their first games in the semi in the quarterfinal, and so it's quite interesting to see their progression. And even if they lose today, I have to offer my congratulations to Stephanie White and the rest of the Indiana Fever team for having brought the team through very difficult times with injuries to be challenging uh, for the WNBA championship. Yeah, uh, Sheree says he who's he? Okay, so Sheree says, I just found out a friend of mine who also served in the military had a generic disorder disease since birth and can't have surgery, 1 of 10 million. He would have, uh, okay. Anyway, he took a fall on a ladder at work 5 years ago and ended up in the hospital intensive care for 3 months. Heart stopped 4 times and 3 months of rehabilitation. I met him in California, and he was on Skid Row, another one who made it. Um, Sheree says, glad you love sports, Skip. I quit watching long ago. All should love what they love uh, to watch. Well, yeah, I mean, I quit watching professional sports um, about 50 years ago. Um, and the only professional sport or sports that I really paid attention to every year was the Army Navy game, which is in my DNA because I was raised in the Navy. But I pretty much have not followed professional sports since college days, even then, not much. And but a dear friend of Debbie's and mine um, got us to start paying attention to Caitlin Clark, who happens to be a cousin of mine, very remote, because my grandmother was a Clark. But but anyway, Caitlin was in her junior year at Iowa when we started watching her. And I was always really taken with her performance and how she could do the things that she has always done in her career, which made her the #1 draft pick 2 years ago and uh, and the rookie of the year last year. So she is an amazing basketball player. I do look forward to her returning to the Fever next year, but she got us hooked on the Indiana Fever this last year and this year, and we enjoy watching it. I enjoy watching women's basketball more than men because the men are so big that for men, if it was going to be interesting like the women, they would have to make the court about 50% larger, and they'd have to set the basket at 13 feet or something like that to make it equal, because the men have grown to be so large now that it's to me it's not fun to watch these men who can be at the logo and reach out and put the basketball in the basket. That's not much fun, but watching the women and their strategy and how they get to do things, and their athleticism is really, really, really interesting. And it's a good way to get out of yourself for a couple of hours. And so I've really enjoyed watching that, and we'll watch it again next year. But anyway, we're going to see the game at 3 p.m. today, and that's Eastern time. So anyway, thank you everyone for being here. We'll talk again next week. And next week, the topic is Aging with the Red Book by Chir Ching, apparently a Chinese Jungian analyst. So anyway, we'll talk about it then.